John Gibbons. I think you should tell the story of how you found out about INVANTI.
No. So I was, sorry, real quick. I'm talking to y'all or to the camera?
To you. You should stare straight at the camera.
Sir.
Hi,
my name is John Gibbons.
I know your instinct is to talk to the camera.
I want to reach the fans out there and just say, but no, okay, so the way I found INVANTI, the previous company I was working for closed, and so I was sans job. My visa was running out.
Well, you were in India.
Yes, in Bangalore, India, just sitting, whiling the time away, drinking from coconuts. Real thing, actually. That was a big part of my day.
Before or after the company closed?
It was before, so I guess if we're really trying to like chart because of then maybe it was all the money on coconuts. No, yeah. So the company didn't close; it got bought, and so I left the company. My visa was expiring, and it was tied to my job and all of that stuff. So I was like, I needed to find a job somewhere else, and so I was part of the social enterprise Google groups. Listserv, so it would basically send out a list of social enterprise related jobs around the world. And so each day I would be looking at, product manager in Vietnam or strategic partnerships in Guam or something. And then there was this really interesting one called INVANTI. I was like, okay, Italy, let's get this going. And so it was talking about how it's like this kind of incubator, but really generator for, more jargon and stuff. And just basically trying to bring interested entrepreneurs together and who don't necessarily have their idea, but put them in an environment where they can kind of come up with something, build a strong product market fit, and have the best chance at succeeding at social enterprise within financial inclusion. It's like, wow, that sounds so interesting. Where, what exciting place is that located in? South Bend, Indiana. All right, yeah, and so it's just cracking me up.
Being that you had been a student at Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, and so I saw that and was like, yep, I know where that is. Then went to the website and was like, is this real? And then down the line, people that I know, that you both know and are connected with, that I went to school with and you guys know, started posting about INVANTI and everything. So I was like, okay, it's probably not a scam. So sounds good. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's funny so a lot of people ask us, okay, where do you find these people and how do you get to them? And so you're always my example of digital channels, even though it's ironic because I'm pretty sure we probably met at some point when you were a student at Notre Dame when I was a grad student, but also like we just know so many of the same people.
Yeah.
And so we always talk about, we go to alumni networks of Notre Dame and Duke, and then there's John.
Yeah.
He was an alumni of Notre Dame, but he found us through...
Really should have happened a lot of different ways.
Right,
and the most ridiculous, a
Google group.
I think you were the first person we interviewed.
Yeah.
And that was the day after I defended my PhD.
Oh.
So it was good. It was like PhD done. Now let's see if we can actually get some entrepreneurs to come to South Bend. And then we did that interview from my apartment. And do you remember halfway through the interview, your power was running out on the computer, and so you had to stand up to get your charger.
Yeah.
And you told us, full disclosure, I'm wearing basketball shorts.
Because I was wearing like a button-down shirt or something, wanted to look professional. Forgot to plug in my computer. Like looking back, I should have just barrel rolled out of the chair and like army crawled to the outlet.
Know the other side of that story?
No.
Maria was wearing basketball shorts as well.
Oh, really? Just you had thought ahead, though. That was the thing. There you are. Oh, my gosh.
I remember something very distinct from your interview. We were talking about, okay, you're interested in entrepreneurship, interested in this financial inclusion. And we started talking about something that we talk a lot about, Maria and I, is the idea of starting in a place in South Bend to pilot things, but we're really concerned with looking at scale and how would you get bigger? Right. And I remember asking you as an entrepreneur that might be going into this, what does scale mean to you? And I think your answer was something along the lines of, I want to be the Google of social enterprise, which was a little bit corny now that I know you well. I don't know where you stole that from, but at the time, I remember Maria and I thinking that we want that mindset, that's possible, and that's my goal. That's why I'm coming to do it.
Yeah.
But I'm willing to start small and sludge through the tough product market fit first to get there.
Yeah, looking back, it might have been a joke, but like it's still like what is behind that is true. Where it's like, why can't it be that massive organization that has so much impact on so many people's lives?
Yeah.
I mean, Google they call themselves a social enterprise, so why can't you also operate at that level without, knowing every single thing about it?
Something else I remember from your interview, which is something we thought was really cool. We always talk about this zooming in and out from a systems perspective, where you're looking up at the whole problem. How are all the stakeholders involved? What are the meta things that are happening? And then narrowing down to here's a very specific problem that's very small inside of this. And I remember during your problem pitch, during your interview, we were like writing notes to each other. It's like, he's got systemic perspective, check. Entrepreneurial focus, check. That was cool to see.
I remember being scared in your problem pitch. You started. I'm trying to remember the exact details of this issue you were talking about in India.
Yeah.
But it was like getting pretty detailed, and I'm like, shoot, we're gonna by the time we're done with this, he's just gonna go do that, and we're gonna lose him because we gave him this template. Now he's thinking about this problem really deeply.
If I had another month on the visa over, it was specifically skilling in India.
That's right. Yeah,
but no, I mean honestly, for however much I had thought about it before, the way you guys were pushing us, the deck that you gave, where it's think of it in the funnel. And kind of bringing it down to that one particular part of the whole problem that you can start at was actually helpful. It wasn't a practice I had gone through before. So to do that on that old problem that I had read a bunch of papers on, talked to a bunch of people about and all of that stuff, it was very exciting just doing it in how much more realistic building a possible solution felt in doing that. And that's something that I've appreciated about my time at Avanti so far.
So talk us through weeks 1 and 2. What was that like?
Yeah, so week 1, there was, if I recall correctly, my memory's not great, but if I recall correctly, one big thing that stood out to me was
pause. Memory's not great.
Yeah.
But you are known in the office as the human encyclopedia.
No, so it's okay, I don't remember most of my own life, but other facts and figures.
There was a CFPB report published in 2007.
Well,
you can cite.
Well, which of the two are you referring to? No, but
version A or version B?
Yeah. You're on that draft? No, okay, so week 1 and 2, the thing, if I recall correctly, that one of the big things that stood out to me was just how the kind of jarring juxtaposition of the two, where it's week 1 was non-stop planned out schedule of exactly what was going to happen in every single person we were going to meet, which was a lot of people, and a lot of breadth of problem, and just kind of crazy going to the west side and then going to the city, then going to Chicago, then all of this stuff. And so it was the pace, all of it, conversations, just kind of sped by, and you were exhausted at the end of the day, even though you really hadn't done anything. You've just been hearing and trying to interact. And then week 2, again, if I remember correctly, was just okay, go for it.
Yeah.
So it's just and wait, we don't have a meeting scheduled today, or, but just that kind of kicking us off into the more self-driven entrepreneurship process and stuff. There was, I think, maybe a meeting on Monday of walking us through, here's the kind of loose rubrics and metrics that we're trying to work with, and here's kind of how we want to lay out the week. Now go figure out a problem or something. But it was a, and I think probably an introduction to Kumu. So I think that actually, even though it was kind of free falling now, it was great just because you had all of these problems still swirling around in your head, and a bunch had jumped out, and you're oh, here's the app I'm going to make for all these or whatever. The initial
ride bucks.
Yeah, ride bucks. It's still happening.
How would you explain Kumu?
I don't know, a spider web of research things that of different research reports and resources that you end up finding yourself caught in, and then I mean, it's amazing. Just a crazy, basically a cataloging system of research and reports that makes a lot of sense when you think about it and how they're connected and everything, but then when you actually look at it all, just as an overwhelming wave of just, oh my God, there's so much here. But I don't know, I really enjoy it. I have no idea how you are able to keep it as organized as you are, but that has been a great resource to be able to kind of just follow your own kind of mental thoughts along the different like connections to, you know, oh, this conversation with this person, now I'm actually in this article and it's like completely related that I wouldn't have stumbled upon otherwise.
It's week 2.
Yeah.
It's kind of on you now to start exploring problems. Like, how did you go about that, and where did you land, and what got you there?
Yeah.
In those first.
Yeah, I'm curious how you chose where to start.
Yeah, so I think it was a combination of, like, some of the conversations were reverberating inside my head and whatnot, but I think the big things that kind of directed me were, so week 2, didn't really know what to do. Looked at Kumu and was like, okay, what are the like most central articles or whatever? What are the biggest reports that cover all of this stuff to give like at least a little bit more depth and see what sparks? So it was like the Federal Reserve's household. I can't even remember the name of it anymore. It's embarrassing, but Household Survey on Economic Development or whatever it was. The CFPB's most recent kind of all-encompassing report, and then we had already read the financial diaries and everything, and so like. Thinking about the financial diaries, reading those reports, and then kind of going from there, the particular areas where it's like, that's interesting. And it seems like just this huge gap. Why does it seem like that? Why does it seem like such a problem that it doesn't seem like many people are working on? Let's kind of chase that rabbit hole, or go into that rabbit hole.
So you kind of landed on 2, right?
Right.
First. So what were those?
Yeah, so actually, the first thing I landed on was like juggling bills, and this was mainly from the financial diaries, and it was just the idea that like people would have to be, your income is below your expenses for a month, possibly because of income volatility, possibly because that's like you're just underwater income-wise, and so people were making decisions on which bills to pay. And which to not, and either take like a late fee if you're talking about a utility, the risk of disconnection, or penalty fees for your credit card debt, whatever. And so financial diaries, they were kind of describing this elaborate dance where people were like, okay, I know I can pay this one late because they won't like start charging me a late fee until then, so I'll cover this one for now, and then I'll know I'll be able to pay that one at this point. And so it was just these intense calculations that I was like, it feels like there's probably like some optimal way to do this, and could that apply to everybody? That you could just have like, instead of doing that mental math yourself, whereas some people are probably better at it than even the app or whatever could be, but other people aren't going to be. So what can you offer that kind of tool? But then that was a little bit too broad, so it was kind of trying to dig deeper within that problem. That first looked at one part, the overall map of like what where their money is coming from and where is it going. Like the average Americans, then kind of focusing on one area that seemed interesting was just the debt piece, and specifically kind of debt collection. And then within that, debt collection seems like it should be enough of a defined area, but then you have just so many different parts of the debt life cycle, as well as different types of debt. And so then I kind of just decided to focus on medical debt because it made up half of it, and has this huge impact on people's lives, and like so many people, it's 1 in 5 Americans have that debt collection trade line on their credit report. Most people don't even necessarily know that they have it, and so that's kind of how I decided to focus on that.
So I think we actually had this conversation last night with somebody. This like idea of, as you're pouring through this research, especially in the early parts, like, do you ever get depressed by reading some of how these problems exist and the systems? I think that's been, like, for me personally, a really fun part about having you in the cohort is I feel like the two of us love to rant about some of these systems and just how they don't work. But I'm curious how, like, especially looking back now, like, how do you think about, especially when you're deciding like what problems to attack, because we constantly talk about how these problems are so big that it's not like we don't pretend to say one venture is going to solve medical billing, right? Or medical debt. We can take a piece of it, and other people need to take other pieces. How do you think about that, especially now, 5 months later, looking back at, making decisions about what to work on, and were things too big or too small, or those kind of questions?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, if anything, I had a problem on just trying to grab too big of things. It was going to be like, juggling bills, everybody yeah, your lives are different, but I'm sure there's an equation that could figure out your exact situations to the optimal level. But then feedback I got from you guys from the steering committee that you had set up and everything was, that's too broad, and just kind of forcing me to dig deeper and deeper. And so that was actually a very helpful thing, is like trying to then break out the systems map and then like zoom in, enhance. And then looking at that systems map again, zoom in, enhance, and like kind of keep on going till you can find something where it's like, yes, I can get my head around that, I can hold that in my hands and figure out that there might be a solution for, this kind of small point that would hopefully help the overall system work better.
What did that feel like? Because like we try to explain that, like, because it is just this narrowing until you get to something that you feel like you could attack.
Yeah.
How did you get like to that point for yourself?
I think it was definitely, again, like working with you guys on the like systems map and drawing out exactly kind of what are we talking about. So for juggling bills, it was, here's all the things that somebody would spend money on. How should it be prioritized and stuff? But it was like too broad, too nebulous, kind of hard to figure out. So then it's like, okay, within this map of, credit card bills, childcare, transportation, all this stuff, debt collection, then kind of focusing, well, okay, just choose one particular area and just, again, like break that out. And then from there, again, that was another map of then, okay, break into medical, and then another map, and then it's like, okay, here's how somebody goes from a medical bill up until debt, and then what happens to that debt down the line. And so it was like, okay, you can't really handle this and this at the same time. They're two different things. So just kind of focus on one and choose according to what you think would have the better impact and help more people out. So, and then kind of settling on that problem. If you're talking about like how to get there, is like in conversations with you guys, with others, of just figuring out what do we think would have the most impact. How did it feel? It was like a very exciting thing to like be able to say, okay, I think I can know everything, not everything, but know enough about this particular area that, and think about it in a way that hopefully we'll be able to find some kind of way to smooth this friction, address this barrier, and hopefully build a business out of it.
Yeah.
And then of course you start researching and you're like, oh my God, now we're back to the same thing of where it's like enhance.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah.
So that was one line of thinking. Medical debt, which kind of came from the financial diaries, income volatility, and then reading the book Scarcity, which we heard a lot about for a while.
Scarcity.
Yeah, I don't know why you had that problem pronouncing that word, but it's scarcity. Just remember in the future,
so that was one line of thinking. That's kind of how you got there. You were at the same time pursuing a second one. Why did you pick that one, and tell us about the trajectory of that second line of thinking?
Yeah, so housing. I mean, like, it was an interesting thing to read about in the Federal Reserve's report. Like, the housing section was interesting already. And then we had heard in that first week a number of people talk about what financing for housing looks like, and particularly the issue around financing for housing worth approximately $50,000 and less, and how it's just not available through conventional means. And so your alternatives are not great, even though that could be possibly a great first rung on the ladder towards like grander, better home ownership, investment in your future, and wealth generation. So we heard about that, read the Federal Reserve report, and then from there is just something I was like thinking about, and like, oh, here's one way to do it, here's another. But I hadn't really, necessarily thoughtfully said, I'm going to try to work on housing. It was actually Jada was like drawing it out on the whiteboard and whatnot, and it was like, oh, can we work together on this? I'll do this research, you do that research, and we'll just try to kind of split it. And so then we started doing that. And then coming at it, we were thinking about just the issue is right now.
Can I pause you there for a second? So one thing that I'm curious about is you were one of 2 or 3 people, I guess, that at the beginning decided to, 1, work on multiple things, but 2, to team up.
Yeah.
So you teamed up with Jada on the housing thing, and then you were doing the medical bill thing by yourself.
Yeah.
Like, what was your thought process? I'm really curious about why you decided to do that.
Team up at all? Or?
Yeah.
Well,
and like pursue multiple lines of like problems. Because there's others in the cohort that just like hyper-focused on one thing.
And like that definitely has its value as well. I don't know, I guess that is just, I think to some degree it's like I was just very interested in both problems and wanted to learn more about them. To another, it was probably, I don't want to say hedging my bets, but
hedging your bets.
Playing the odds, of just seeing what can shake out. So there's that, and then also, and so I mean the housing thing was very interesting. That I had to team up with Jada. I mean that was just kind of the sacrifice you have to make to learn more. No, I'm just kidding. It was
poor Jada's not even here to defend herself.
Yeah, right. Jada and I had been talking about it too, on that outside of it as well, because we live together too. So it was, so joining her on that, I was also excited to be working with somebody else just because then it's like, you can go farther together and all of that kind of piece. And have a different perspective as well, coming from a different place, looking at it and probably pointing out things that I would never have noticed.
One thing we hear a lot of is, okay, who are the backgrounds of the people that are in the cohort, right? And so then when it's like, well, we have this team that's working on this really interesting housing issue, and then they're like, who's on the team? It's like, well, John, background in political science, Chinese, lived in India for 3 years, working on a digital online jobs marketplace. Yeah. So of course, he would be the right one to get into the real estate game. Yeah. But at the same time, I've never questioned that you this is a venture that I would trust you to do, but I'm on the inside. Mm-hmm. So I think
in particular the portion of the venture that you're owning. Yeah. Because you recently had a conversation with Jada about splitting up roles and responsibilities, and that's where I think if you just look at your resumes on a piece of paper and say kind of housing startup, there's some question marks. Yeah. But as you guys have thought really hard about what are the pieces of us doing this, and what can you own and what can Jada own, that's when it starts to make sense.
Yeah, I think also I consider you guys in some ways close to being experts in some of these issues now, right? Like these housing land contracts and how banks make mortgages and HUD regulations, which is hard to communicate sometimes because it's just your background, you've never done that. Yeah. You also just spent 5 months where that was your job.
Mm-hmm. That was really cool for us to see when there was a flip happening, when we would bring people in to drop in events or to do interviews. In the beginning, you guys were very much kind of in question asking mode, taking notes. And then as time went on, I'd say even in month 2 and 3, you started to know things that some of our bankers coming in didn't know, right? You had perspectives, you read reports that they hadn't, you knew of things that were happening that they didn't, and you had a much tighter understanding of the dynamics of the system. So you were talking to people who sat at one desk, and they could tell you everything about the view from that desk, and you guys were very clearly starting to have kind of the view of how the different things were playing together, so it was fun for us to watch you guys becoming experts. And being able to kind of play with the big boys on some of these conversations.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if I would say expert by any means, but and I mean, coming at it from the angle that we did, where we didn't really know much before, we were able to kind of sit over and just because if a banker is going to go investigate all of this stuff, they already know more than I could ever know on the mortgage side of things that banks do. And they can then go approach, what does seller financing look like? What are people's actual concerns? What does the rent market look like? And again, they can probably become more experts, but they are coming at it with a certain kind of background and frame of seeing it, and the same thing with anybody else from another perspective. So being kind of the blank slates and whatnot, I think it helped.
Sometimes we talk about free agents. Yeah. You know what I mean? And just in the sense that you guys get the time and the space to learn about. Yeah. Just from many perspectives.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I wouldn't necessarily say expert, but it's still have had that opportunity that INVANTI has provided to kind of come at it from so many different angles to hopefully get a more holistic view of the system as it is and possibly how it could change. And then also I definitely think, for Jada and I, neither of us necessarily have all that much experience in housing prior to this. But the way we have kind of filtered and fallen into our respective roles and how we see the company going from here does make a lot of sense. That was the kind of background I was talking about. She's got the investment banking, analytics, finance, all that stuff, where I'm, just over here let's do service design. How do we make people happy? And what's these relationships and what is this and that? And so, I mean, I'm doing the parts of it that I definitely would prefer to do, and I think she's doing the parts that she would prefer to do. So it's been exciting to have that kind of fit work out.
Yeah. So probably 4 weeks ago, you decided to put the medical bill one kind of on the side. Right. Walk us through that. I'm curious what was going through your head. I know we had conversations about it, but really what was the decision there between the housing one and the medical bill one?
Yeah, so I thought the medical bill one was going to be what could go faster and farther, just because it's like, you're not talking about a 10-year debt and like a minimum investment of $30,000 to buy a house or anything. It could be, it felt a lot lighter and faster to move with. But then things started happening on the housing side with potential partners that just kind of kicked it into high gear. And so I was like, oh wow, this could happen. Like, this is the time and place to try something on the housing side. And so it was like, gotta kind of redirect time and effort here. I still wanted to keep the medical bill thing going on. And I kind of felt a little bit bad about the idea of like just dropping it, just because it's like, am I that mercenary where it's like a moth to the flame gonna go where the heat is? But it's like, yeah, kind of.
Another way to say that in a more positive way is being opportunistic, right?
Yeah, okay. Tomato, opportunistic tomato.
Moth in the flame.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like that's, there's like, ooh, there's a little fire over here, like time to burn,
You have a way with words, John.
I'll take that. I'm going to take that as the compliment. I don't think it was intended to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it did feel like bad at points of like, just like, oh, I'm going to drop this or whatever. But I mean, I'm still interested. I'm still thinking about it and still thinking that it could be a potential thing to try to do. But it was just like, this is where the fire is, where it's like, where we have gas, we may as well go.
Did you have emotional highs and lows through we're 5 months in now.
Right, yeah, I mean.
Because you're pretty, from my standpoint, you're a pretty even keel guy.
Oh, wow.
Except when you're on the phone with AT&T.
Okay, they brought that
Don't get him started.
Sorry.
Yeah. Let's talk about what really matters here, and it's AT&T's garbage. No, okay. Highs and lows emotionally. Yes, all the time. If I'm hiding it well, that's awesome. But it's just like, I don't know if it's my ability to deal with it or if it is the actual amount that I face at any time, but it's just like my emotions probably flow with the ambiguity of the situation or whatever. So it's like, the more ambiguous, the less clear it looks like there is a path forward, the more kind of like that's kind of correlating with despair and whatnot, or just worries of like, oh my God, what is going to happen next? And then, there are moments where it's like, okay, this is how we're going to do it. Yeah. This is exactly, if we hit these different steps, we're going to be here, and that's just that much closer to the overall place where we want to be. And so that is that much more exciting and like thrilling. But yeah, it is definitely very pitchy. But I mean, overall, just like, even in those moments of like, oh my God, what are we going to do? It's like, at the end of the day, it's just a great experiment. Going to try to take it and run with it. And if it works out, could be.
Something else I'm curious about is how you've been thinking about what your next steps are after INVANTI, and how has that changed from kind of day one walking in, where you thought you were going to be, and then as you progress through to where you are now with your future plans?
Yeah. Day one walking in, I don't think I thought about it that much, and I think that's probably been a problem throughout the whole time.
I don't know.
I probably should be thinking about.
I think it's a good way to come in.
Yeah.
I mean, you just have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. Is it going to be like, I assume I'll be Fortune 500 by March 1st? No. No. So, yeah. I guess I didn't really have much of an idea of where I would be at. And had I. Again, like asking a month and a half ago where I thought I would be at is very different from where I think I will be at now. Mm-hmm. I'm sure it'll change again in another half a month. Right. But I probably thought, say like a month and a half, that I was going to be like working on this medical billing app or something and trying to figure out if there's someone cheap enough in India where I can actually be paying them to like make updates, or if I'm going to have to be trying to learn how to build an iOS app or whatever, and just kind of like not dragging along, but like crawling along, doing the best I can with as lean and minimally viable product or whatever that I could possibly be working on. Whereas now, still a lot is in the air, trying to figure it out, but it's like we're playing with, feels like much larger stakes that could either kind of launch us into a exciting next stage, or cause, serious needs to retool, reconfigure how we see what we're doing right now.
Yeah. So I think part of what's interesting to me. So like, if we've been successful, we've indoctrinated you that South Bend is a cool place to start a company.
Yeah.
And you guys are like starting this housing thing in South Bend.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming there was a somewhat conscious choice to decide to stay here and pursue. So I'm really curious.
I mean, again, INVANTI in Italy. I was looking at no. Yeah. So I don't know when it started happening along the way, but I don't even know if it's a good thing. But like, it's somewhere along the way I became like started thinking about, you know, my Midwestern identity. You know, I'm from outside Chicago and everything, and I never really thought I was Midwestern until people started telling me I was Midwestern.
Which means you're Midwestern.
Yeah. And I was just like, how do you mean? Can I get the door for you first? And like all this stuff. But then like that kind of started building into, you know, that awareness started building into like some sort of pride, and hopefully not, but I think it's getting towards like a chauvinism of like Midwest is the best and then there's the rest, and like that kind of but
How do you come up with these things?
How? By staring at a blank wall.
The question isn't how, it's when.
Yeah, also true. Right now. No, so there was that kind of thing. And then like, okay, so for the last like 3-4 years I was in India.
Yeah.
So most of what I was seeing is happening in the US, all these big changes, all these stories about like this or that happening to the heartland or to this forgotten part of America or whatever. I was like reading about from there. And so I did start thinking about like more, what is the Midwest? How much do I really know about it? How much needs to be done there? How could I see myself working there, hopefully adding value to people's lives somehow? Then that kind of started building in this awareness of like, that is where I'm from. That is like who I am. And moving towards like, there could be, and like, while it's, people think whatever they think about the Midwest, flyover states, like I've heard country mouse recently, which I don't really properly understand. It has all these great things going for it. And while you can talk about how so much of it is struggling, there are just already so many exciting people doing exciting things to help it kind of come back from that and rise. And so I think like South Bend is possibly the best example of that as a place. I'm just lucky to be feeding on, you know, the kind of forebears or other people who had been kind of, who sensed that and actually helped create that wave. And I'm just excited to be kind of riding it, of where it's like, you had depression and you had like stagnation and all these troubles, and then like people saying, no, we're going to, by the force of our will, try to bring it to be, to its, restored to its former glory, if not an even better place or whatever. So I mean, that's so many things, you know, like you guys, .SB, like the mayor, everybody. And so to like hear about that and kind of like see this story of a city on the move and everything, it's like, that's very exciting. I would be very excited to take part in that. And I think that's why I'm so interested also in housing and kind of picturing that in this grander vision, where it's like South Bend is emblematic of many cities in the Rust Belt in the Midwest that have struggled and have like these same issues around housing. If we can build a model here that we can take there, what you're doing is like hopefully building home ownership, and then from there building community and helping to kind of lay that bedrock to build further greatness for these cities. Everything a return to.
It's interesting because like I think that's really cool, and I think like some of the concepts you're talking about of like community and those kind of things are typically not associated with for-profit ventures.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how you see those two now after like not only 5 months of looking at these things, but like having something that is definitely going to try to be a for-profit venture, but that like you care very passionately about having an impact.
Yeah.
What's your thinking about that now?
Yeah, so I mean, the like for-profit and impact thing, I was definitely, you know, supportive before. The last company was a social enterprise, all of that. That's kind of how, at least in the last number of years, I've thought like that's the way to build impact, is through that kind of sustainable scale. But then like for-profit and like community building and stuff, it's kind of hard to think about, because when I typically think of like some for-profit social enterprise, I am thinking of like, massive scale. And that means like, let's make it cheap to replicate. Let's strip all of the manual parts out of it and make this thing automated and put it online, and then put it on the cloud, and then boom, we're good. But so thinking about housing with that is just that much more difficult to really kind of wrap my head around, like what does scale look like for that? Because at least in the way that we're trying to get started, it is like through communities and community partners. and in those conversations that I've had so far and how they kind of see what community is, it's like, I don't know, I'm getting kind of away from the point, but basically like there seems to be a way to do it differently, to not just have that kind of, to have that, to build those kind of like manual pieces of it, those human interactions, like face-to-face meetings, all of that, into a for-profit model, and have that for-profit model significantly benefit from it, from that connection. And it also just kind of like, it's a further way to differentiate ourselves from the other people playing in this space. Like there are others doing pretty much the same thing as we want to do, who are just that much more profit motivated, and so as a result, whoever's buying the house is kind of left in the cold. We can be different from that by, you know, fixing our incentives and whatnot, so that we are, at the end of the day, what benefits us benefits the buyer, and that's something that I've always appreciated you guys focusing on. Benefits the real beneficiary, and then is further promoted, fueled by also benefiting neighborhoods in that community and stuff. I don't know if that's a really good answer, or really answers your question or not, but that's kind of...
No, it's cool, because I think like what frustrates me is when people try to put problems into buckets, like that's a nonprofit problem or that's a government problem.
Right.
And like some of those classifications are helpful, but I think what we're trying to prove here is that like given some time and space, we might be able to break down some of those assumptions. And I think what you guys are doing like fits in that category. Because I think people think low income housing or low value housing, there must be no money in it.
Right.
There's no way you could start a venture.
Right.
And you guys are trying to find a way to do it. And so far I've like convinced at least enough people that it might be possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That has been fun. So the past few weeks, you've been running around having conversations with prospective buyers and partners. And Jade had been running around having conversations with prospective investors.
Yeah.
And you've both been getting feedback, which is kind of coming home to the center that the thing that you're creating, it seems like for now, is creating value both for prospective homeowners who are going to benefit from getting into a house instead of continuing to pay rent.
Right.
And a real estate investor who wants to make a return on their money. And it looks like you guys you're making the case to both sides that there's going to be benefit. And so that's cool. That's cool to see that happening in parallel.
That it has been very exciting, just because it feels like in so many, at least for other, you know, two-sided businesses where you're kind of serving two masters, that their interests are often pitted against each other and in competition. But at least from the conversations that we've had so far, and the way we're looking to do this, we're hoping that's not the case as much. That like what's good for the goose is good for the gander. There, you want another folksy term, but really
I wanted one more.
Yeah. But yeah, just so that, you know, everybody's interests, if possible, as much as possible, interests are aligned. So everybody's excited about everybody else doing well. I don't know. But yeah, just like it has been very fun to see that kind of develop in tandem.
Yeah. I'm curious what your kind of perceptions of Invanti how they've changed. So since that first email, where it's like, this is awesome, it must exist in Italy and not in South Bend.
Right.
To like 5 months later, where like you've been through some of the ups and downs of us doing this for the first time.
Yeah.
That was a little bit too enthusiastic.
No.
Yeah. Definitely.
For the ups, that's what I was enthused about, the ups. I weep for your downs. Go on.
But like I'm curious, like, you know, as we've been working out our own kinks, what's your probably more on the ground realistic view of Invanti now, and like where is its value versus maybe where you saw it in the beginning?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a hard question to answer, just because I don't know if it's changed that much. Like how I saw Invanti and kind of what my role was and everything, that has changed a significant amount. But what Invanti's value is and kind of what it can offer and how it can help create, I don't know if that's changed that much, and it might be because of how you set the tone at the beginning. That first week was just these meetings and stuff. And then the following week, there's a big piece around kind of the process and how we're trying to take this forward. And so ups and downs aside, like, you know, moving buildings, this or that, the way that Invanti kind of helps would-be entrepreneurs, wannabe entrepreneurs or whatever, come and do intensive research to find that problem. That's great. That's there, and I've always kind of seen that, and it's it's stayed throughout. But then also just the ability to kind of connect and like sit as I guess a locus at so many loci, whatever, that kind of map, and just kind of helps feed someone all of the possible insights and connections and conversations they might need to try to figure out a business. And then from there, help them guide them really through so many of the early steps and give them just the frameworks of how to think about things, how to approach different things. So, I mean, I don't think my conception of what the value has changed.
Tell me about the first part, though. You said how you see your role has changed.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess like I had, before I started this, it was probably figuring that it was much more like an employee of some sort, where it's like, oh, we're all going to work on something together, and then you're going to go take and spin it off or something and like manage it or whatever, instead of as much responsibility in kind of creation. But then at the same time, it was likely that this was kind of how it happened, where it was like, I thought it was going to be the employee thing, got here, swung to the idea that, oh my God, we're all just kind of alone, sitting in this building and have to figure out our things. Let's go do this. We have like the process maps, we have the Kumu, what's next? Swung hard that way, but then kind of leveled out and towards this middle point where it's, yes, it is our projects, whatever we're trying to do, and we'll take them forward, but that you guys have been co-founders to everyone. And you've said it before, like, see you as co-founders, and I certainly do, in that, like, so much help, advice, and just even helping think through various things, because, like, at the end of the day, it might be a problem that you hadn't thought of either, but just can, different set of eyes and different minds saying, like, okay, let's work on this together and whatnot. So that has been, I would say I hadn't foreseen that was going to be it's such a big part of the program, but it really was.
Yeah. Anything that you've been thinking about asking us, like burning questions, 6 months later, 5 months later?
Not really.
Besides, why hasn't Dustin brought up blockchain yet?
Oh, yeah, no, I thought you were going to ask, like, where do you see yourself in 6 months?
It better say blockchain.
On the blockchain. Myself, literally, smartly contracting. No,
Immutable John Gibbons.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We just need a token blockchain joke in here at some point.
I think you are the token joke.
Something about nonces. No, okay. No, not necessarily. I guess, yeah. What was the moment, or like, if there was an impetus, what was it that made you think, yeah, we're just going to start this? Let's just take it and run with it.
So I guess a version of this had been simmering for a while, and we knew we were going to do it eventually.
Right.
And then we were at a point where Dustin was looking for a new job. I was trying to find a job for after my PhD. And so I was like, I think, have we told you this story? I was out like interviewing with McKinsey in DC. And Dustin,
you haven't heard this?
No, I hadn't heard this.
Just had a phone call with.
I was at lunch.
He was at lunch, and his boss had asked him, like, what is this an hour and a half block you have every morning with Maria? Like, what are you guys working on? So he told his boss what we were working on, and then he said, hey, you should stick around for another year and use that year to kind of do a pilot of INVANTI with Esteem, with the idea that you guys will then kind of spin it off the following June.
Right.
So he called me. I was like about to go to like a networking event or something.
You were literally in the bathroom.
I was in the bathroom getting ready. He called me. He's like, hey, we have a chance. I'm going to stay with Esteem. We can pilot it and then try to spin it off in June. I was like, okay, yep, we're doing that.
Just gonna do it.
Hang up. And then I went downstairs and immediately tried to start recruiting these like McKinsey
to come to INVANTI.
I remember when we were like after that conversation, the dust settled a little bit. I remember talking to my dad and saying, like, someone just laid out a way for me to do this that like probably will never come again, which is like, here's a stable job for a year. Part of your job is going to be testing the thing that you might want to build. And by the way, I'll like try to support you in any way I can to do that. And the timing, like, it was just like, it would be so stupid for me to look this thing in the eye and say no.
Right.
So then at that point, it was just like, all right, then how do we how do we do it? The other thing
from that moment, it was like, we're gonna do this.
We're just gonna do
it's
it.
happening.
So,
Gotcha.
And that
well, it
was,
was like,
that was like
we have to find a really
this year.
we have to find like a really good reason for
Not to do it.
to say no. Like that's what
Yeah.
we're looking for. The only other thing was having done things before this. Like as soon as it was like there's someone in it with me from the beginning that wants to go full time if
Right.
it's there. It's like that's hard to find sometimes, and doing it as a team was like critical.
Yeah.
Which I think like you're starting to find now, like how big it gets quickly.
Oh yeah, definitely.
If like 2 people definitely changes the game. Yeah.
It's very cool.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say to us, John? You still have a month left, so be careful.
I don't know. I figure any problems we have, we can hash them out.
Okay.
I'm still gonna make blockchain
Okay,
puns,
puns,
at the end of the day.
puns.
No, that's all I got. Yeah.
I feel like that was a turning point, John.
That
Is
Halloween or
the last pun for our Halloween blockchain. Remember how long we were doing the blockchain costume?
Right.
We were trying to come up with the puns.
Yep.
And we couldn't
There's
figure
a
out the
deadline,
last
too.
one. There was a deadline.
What was the last
I
one?
don't even remember. I just remember
Check the
it was like
Instagram.
2 hours. It's like 2 hours.
Were we coming on? Oh, no, we spent the time. I think that was figuring out what Halloween jokes,
That's right.
blockchain related Halloween jokes, we could make for the Instagram
Yeah.
captions. Something.
Well, once
about
we broke through that
Dracula.
wall, I knew
Yeah.
John's gonna
do
start a
something
venture. If you can make it through a Halloween blockchain pun with a deadline,
I mean,
that's what it takes.
I'm not sure how many of those skills translate, but
should we like put that as an interview question for the next round?
If given 2 hours
Yes.
to come up with a blockchain. Yeah.
do you want to live in that world where you get like, X number of people who just want to make puns all the time? I would.
I think one punny person per cohort is
One punny
just
person.
fine.
There you go. So you just have your pun short list. You select which ones are.
It's like Moneyball. You need one pun master amongst
Yep.
the group. Yeah.
All right, John, I think you got some people waiting for you to give you some feedback out there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So get out of here.
All right. Bye. We'll be talking with you.